So we're back in the room, and we're going to pick up really where we began. We're going to go back to our Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, remember 2149 of Taurus, because as we've already discussed, the royal family, big connection with members of the royal family. Now we're going to take it out. We're going to have a little look at Russia and Putin and Ukraine, because they also are in the sights of this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. So just to give you a little list of these, we've got in the Russia 1991 chart, we've got Jupiter-Uranus opposing the Venus-Pluto conjunction, with Vladimir Putin, who has Pluto on the midheaven at 22 Leo, 21 Leo. The Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is squaring his midheaven and Pluto.
And his node.
And his node.
On absolutely. The IC.
And we also have Ukraine's moon at 22 degrees of Aquarius. So the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is squaring that moon. And of course, the moon also opposes a whole string of planets in Leo, Jupiter, Mercury, and Venus. So we certainly know that this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is going to change things. But we have to say, I mean, when we think about the day itself, the day that we're coming to you, in fact, with the Sun-Pluto square and the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction and the connections it's making to these charts, Russia, Ukraine, Putin, we have to know that something is happening at this point in time. Now, we may not know what that is. We may not get some official announcement or some event that sort of says, oh, well, that's changed everything.
And to cover ourselves, we are recording this 5 or 6 days before the conjunction.
Yes.
So if anything happens in the next 5 or 6 days and we've not mentioned it, this is our get out.
Well, this is actually, we're recording on the 9th of April, which is the day after the wonderful solar eclipse we've just been through. So yes, that gives us a bit of time perspective. So we know that the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is going to be change. We know that. We'd like to see something happen on that day. There may be something going on this day that we don't know about, but at some point we are going to see, we said fireworks, didn't we? We agreed fireworks was a good...
Fireworks is a good way to describe it. I've just had my 4th strong coffee of the day, right? So I'm just going to launch into this give me 1 minute to launch into this.
I will stay quiet for 1 minute.
You heard this here, right? Vladimir Putin has Pluto on the midheaven at 21 degrees Leo and the node at 20 degrees Aquarius. The Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is squaring his Pluto on the midheaven and squaring his node. Pluto on the midheaven is an aspect of power, whether it is power in or power over, power filled or powerful. It seems pretty clear to me that he is coming up for some major changes, lifetime changes in his life. And the fact that Putin's Pluto on the midheaven is so strongly squared to Russia's Pluto and Venus in the Russian chart, with Pluto in the Russian chart ruling the 4th house of the home, and Venus in the Russian chart ruling the 10th house of public image and profile, it seems to me that something vast is coming up for both Russia and Pluto in the very near future that is going to change its direction for the long term. The fact that this also hits the Ukrainian moon adds another level of complexity to this, and it's pretty clear that Ukraine will be a part player in this at the time. Quite how it's all going to work out, I don't know. But if I were advising Vladimir Putin what to do in the next 2 weeks, I would certainly be saying, stay low.
Yeah, I mean, we could see a change of the guard, but there are 2 other things that we're probably not going to spend much time on in this video. And we've mentioned briefly the Saturn Neptune conjunction, but the Saturn Neptune conjunction has a lot of resonances with Russia. the development of communism. I mean, the Tsar Nicholas was stepped down and was assassinated on the Saturn Neptune conjunction. And then when we have the Berlin Wall coming down, that was on the Saturn Neptune conjunction.
And it went on a Saturn Neptune opposition.
Exactly. We have these things. So we're looking at Saturn and Neptune getting closer and closer together. Technically, they're not going to be in conjunction until February the 20th, 2026. But in July of 2025, they're very close. They are within, minutes of each other. And in a way, I would suggest whether everything kicks off now with Putin and Ukraine, and there is some event, whether that's within the war itself or something that happens within Russia itself, or, we can speculate. But certainly we are now getting within that framework where Russia will change again in 2025, as it did with the death of the Tsar, as it did with the Berlin Wall and the death of the Soviet Union. We've got another one of those coming up from 2025.
And I believe, I'm not sure on this, but I believe that the Marx Engels' Communist Manifesto was also written on a Saturn-Neptune conjunction.
I think it was, and I think that was even before. That was before.
Yes, that was in the late 1800s.
Yeah, that was 1800 and something.
1880, something like that.
Which is fascinating. You think they already put that manifesto together, but then actioned it in 1912, yes. On the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So, or 1917, sorry, the October, the Bolshevik, 1970, the revolution and everything. So, yes, I mean...
Russia's going to change big time.
Yes, it is. And we are going to say it kicks off from this point. However it manifests, we can't be sure. But there is a great stirring of cry freedom is another phrase I would use for the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And I'm thinking that the Russian people aren't of one voice in how they are being led and what they think of. So are we beginning to get to a point where there is more uprising within Russia itself and more of a leaning towards the idea that the path that they are embarked on, world power, so, heading into Europe to, annex other parts of Europe, is there a stronger movement now, or a movement getting stronger to make for those changes that could again mean radical change for Russia and the end of Putin, I imagine?
Certainly watch this space around Russia, Putin, over the coming few weeks, and then for the repercussions over the next 2 years.
Yes, it's very interesting.
Fascinating.
Really, yes.
Astrology in action.
Yeah, absolutely. So we should move on, and we'll move back to America again, and we think about the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Oh, one little word about Israel, I think.
Oh, now, I'm not going to spend too long on this because we don't want to get too embroiled in it, but Israel and Palestine were granted independence, but they came into being as nation states. And they were supposed to both come into being at exactly the same time. But because of various invasions of Israel by Syria, Egypt, and Jordan, Israel pronounced its independence 8 hours before they were actually supposed to come into existence, which is why the Palestinian state horoscope is very similar to that of Israel, but it's 8 hours later. The main factor here is that both of them in their birth charts, Israel and Palestine, were born with the sun at 21 degrees of Taurus, where the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is happening. So there's going to be developments here, and it's not going to be quiet. And let's hope it's going to be a really big breakthrough.
Yeah, that B word, breakthrough. Let's focus on that because it needs a breakthrough. I mean, we as the world witness what's going on, and our hearts go out to everybody. Everybody. And, it needs to stop. And will that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction facilitate that? And we get a freedom and liberation? We'll have to wait and see, because the alternative is not thinkable. Really, it's not thinkable, folks. You know?
We've had enough wars.
We have.
We're supposed to be intelligent.
I know, but I think it's within us because we have Mars within us. Mars is our fighting instinct.
Yeah, but, you know, you can be confrontational and aggressive, but you can also be just projective and assertive.
Yeah, well, more women. More women in charge, girls. Yes,
Mrs. Thatcher.
maybe not Mrs. Thatcher, but anyway.
Yeah.
The rise of the feminine.
The rise of the divine feminine. Absolutely. And the more men that start owning their own femininity,
absolutely, it's all part of that.
Yes.
Absolutely. And that could be a shift in consciousness, couldn't it?
That would be the single best thing ever.
It would. So where to? Do we want to go? Do we want to spend any more time on Israel? I think we've sort of said it all, haven't we, really? By the way, Netanyahu is going. With that
before the end of the year.
Yeah, well, yeah. Pretty.
Speaking of the divine feminine,
yes.
not. I've labelled these next two charts a few times now. I've talked about them as being dinosaurs, both in terms of their age and in the fact that they are becoming increasingly extinct and irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, gosh.
Which one should we start with?
Well, we need to talk about the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction and where it hits, I think. So for Biden, we're looking at the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction opposing his Mercury.
Which rules his seventh.
Rules his seventh house. And he's already got Uranus and Saturn there. Jupiter's going to go over that. And so that's the release, isn't it? So that's an end. That's an ending of some description.
He's in trouble.
He's in trouble. And he's got Pluto, like the King Charles.
His moon.
Yeah, it's because the moon is at 0 degrees of Taurus. We can imagine that actually Biden and King Charles would get on very well.
Oh, yes.
They are a double act.
Yes, very much so.
They would really respect each other. And
like those two old guys in the Muppets.
That's moving swiftly on. So yes, Joe Biden is definitely up against it. And the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, we could say, if we look at his Mercury, we could say, is that a change in thinking? This is a massive mindset change.
When I see Uranus opposite someone's Mercury, I tell them, look, your mind is going to change. You're either going to change your mind or your mind is going to change. And it's not what you think that's going to change, it's what you think with. So it's not the software, it's the hardware. So it's not the words that change, but it's the opinions, the ideas, the philosophies, the beliefs. So I see him as coming up for a massive reset at a mental level, which because of his age could be actually a breakthrough or quite easily be a breakdown.
We'll have to wait and see. And, obviously we don't want to make comments here because these are real people, real lives, which is why we're giving plenty of room to fill in the blanks, so to speak, as, life takes over from the astrology, as it were.
But also Uranus will oppose his Sun and his Venus over the next 2 years.
Yes, it will. When it gets very, very close there, it opposes the Sun pretty well this year as well.
Yes.
And I think both of us feel, we'll get to that a bit later. So we should also look at Donald Trump, and the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction for him is on his midheaven. It's a little wide. It's 2 or 3 degrees, but I would say it's
also exactly in conjunct.
Yes, it's in conjunct his moon. And so, I mean, the only way, if Donald Trump was a client of mine and I didn't know anything about his history or about who he was, and I was just introduced to Donald Trump as, I was going to say Joe Smith, I would look at that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction on his midheaven and say, guess what? There's going to be a change in job. There's a huge role change for you. Whatever you are doing right now is not going to be what you're going to be doing in the wake of this, once Jupiter and Uranus have done their work. And remember, we're not talking about just April the 20th and 21st. We're talking about through the year when we get these bounces towards that. So my personal feeling is that, I wouldn't want to bet money on Donald Trump making it to the election or being elected. Well, I certainly think he won't be elected. That's something I've felt for a very long time. There is not going to be a second presidency for Mr. Trump. And this is not something I don't want or I want. I'm unbiased here as I talk. I'm just stating what I believe. But this Jupiter Uranus, and remember, right now, April the 15th, Mr. Trump is going to be in court, the first president in US history to be in a criminal court. Something is going to happen with this case, whether he is found innocent or he's found guilty, whatever it is. He's the first president to be tried by a jury of 12 ordinary men and women. So this is historical. This, I believe, could well knock him off his perch, whatever the ultimate result of that is. So my reading of this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is just that. That's the end of, the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction will actually knock him because of that trial date, but the immediate aftermath of this as well. Because by the time we're into mid-late May, Uranus is then spending 9-10 months conjunct his midheaven. And by the time we're into July, August, Uranus is going to be spending a year squaring his Mars. So, one way or another, there's some very, very big, probably quite challenging and even disruptive challenges coming up for him, which if he is flexible and adaptable, he can make work for himself and turn them into a whole new reinvention. And if he's intransigent and inflexible, it could be like the House of Cards coming tumbling down. Yes, it could. I like that interpretation. And I felt recently with all the court cases and all the delays and the changes and the Supreme Court saying, oh, we'll think about whether you're immune, Mr. Trump. It's almost like he's a kind of Houdini. He's certainly,
he's Teflon coat.
It's amazing. So you can't really ever say anything about Mr. Trump because he will defy you by bouncing back, doing something else, coming up with something that he needs at the time that he needs it. But reading through the lines, really, I think, this is too much for one person. And you think about, his age, and you think, how does a guy this age withstand this pressure? He's in court, he's with his attorneys, he's dealing with a campaign, he's speaking at rallies, he's doing fundraising. This is exhausting. This is utterly exhausting. So how well will he stand up health-wise to what's going on here?
And this brings us then onwards to the final two charts we want to look at before we start, because we do need to summarise everything we've said as well.
Do we? I'm not sure I can. This has been such a long journey.
Oh, well, just 2 or 3 minutes to summarise it, I'm sure.
I was going to say, let's have a pit stop. No, let's go on. Yes, this chart we are going to have a look at, and in fact we'll probably put this one up on the screen as well because it's so interesting.
And I think you should talk about this a bit more than me because you've studied this chart far more than me.
Yes, it's very interesting. I think
what is it? It's the full moon.
But let me give a little presage to this first of all, and why sometimes critics of astrology say, why didn't you pick that out? Why didn't you see that coming? Well, apart from the fact we don't see events, but certainly when we start picking around and finding particular conjunctions or configurations, this demands a lot of work. You have to keep abreast of everything that's happening. And of course, when you're working in a year, like for instance I am, like Steve would as well, with clients, then we come across these parts that we wouldn't have normally looked at. August is the great holiday month in the Northern Hemisphere. Nothing ever happens in August. But I promise you, this August, there is going to be plenty happening. And on August the 19th, and I'm just going to, we'll try to get the chart on the screen for you so that you can see it as well. But I'm going to take you through what's going on. We have a full moon, 27 Aquarius, the sun 27 Leo, and that full moon is exactly, and I mean exactly, squaring Uranus. But that's not all. We have Venus in Virgo opposing Saturn, squaring Jupiter.
And Mars.
And Mars. Mars is in there as well. So we've got two massive T-squares happening at the same time. And this is really pressure. It is about unexpected developments, things getting wildly out of control. But also in there is a sense of things never being the same thereafter. And it's the Saturn. We've got Saturn squaring Jupiter, and any kind of big Jupiter-Saturn connection. And, when we think about the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions, when the American elections are held on a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, there are all sorts of things that come from that. We associate all sorts of very important for that particular presidency. It has a particular mark in it. I'm not going to get into that right now, but we have we have this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. So we're looking at law, we're looking at justice, we're looking at the economy, we're looking at boundaries, we're looking at all sorts of things constitutional around this particular time. And put together with, Uranus intersecting the full moon, we've got the idea that there is a complete change of view at this point. Everything that leads up to this and around this time is the way we thought it would happen. This changes everything. Now it's all going to be different. We can only speculate what this might be. It's the Democratic Convention that week. Now, there are some calls right here at this time. Remember, we're talking about April the 9th. We're recording this, that there is some problem with having any changes that are going to be implemented. The date of that, of the convention is too late to make for any changes. They can't do that. So there is a cry for it to be brought forward. And maybe that will happen. But if it hasn't been brought forward and the convention is at that particular point, there are going to be shock and awe and upsets and all sorts of changes happening within the democratic movement. But that will spill over into the political arena generally. So I'm going to let you have a go here, because
particularly the way it affects Trump and Biden's charts as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, the full moon, it's an exact T-square with Uranus, and that's making a grand cross with Biden's sun.
Right.
It's also that Sun-Uranus moon T-square, precise T-square, is very, very strongly connected to Donald Trump's Mars on his ascendant.
Absolutely. And that's a dangerous thing. That's a very dangerous thing. And Saturn is on Biden's IC. I think
there are a number of people out there in the world who have already stated this, so we're not breaking new ground here. But there is a school of thought out there in the world that neither of these two gentlemen will contest the election. And from my personal astrological perspective, I think there's a good 40, even 50% chance that this is the case.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you as well. But the circumstances of why and how it comes about, we cannot possibly speculate. No. But these charts don't, these dates don't, I was going to say happen by accident. No. I mean, this is one of the beautiful things about astrology and the geometry of astrology, how these things come together and form their alignments. And we know they're going to have a great bearing on the countries and the leaders of those countries. That, keep your eyes on this period, because it's going to change our preconceptions about
August 19th,
how elections, America, all sorts of things. And we actually bothered to set up a chart for the election as well. So I'm going to let you have a look at this first.
We set a chart for 7 a.m. EST on the 5th of November 2024, which is the date that the polls open in the American election. And at that moment, it's a void moon. Although the moon is strongly square Neptune, but it is void. And that straight away tells me that there'll be no certain outcome from this. But much more significantly, in that horoscope of the American election, at the moment the polls open, there is pretty much an intercepted but less than 1 degree opposition from Mars at 0 degrees of Leo to Pluto at 29 degrees of Capricorn. And this is only 2/3 of 1 degree away from being precise. And this is fireworks times 10. There's going to be some very sudden, possibly radical and unexpected circumstances around the American election, which are going to make it an election day like no other in history.
Exactly. And because we cannot be sure that Biden and Trump will be the candidates for the presidency at that time, we can't be absolutely sure. But if perhaps Biden is running, then that Mars is squaring his moon at 0 degrees of Taurus. So the Pluto is, and also the sun at 13 degrees of Scorpio is on his Mars. So I have to say, folks, this is, any chance that this is going to be a seamless kind of,
movement forward.
Yeah, no. Movement forward, not at all. It is going to rewrite the history books on so many ways. And perhaps a little nearer the time, it might be interesting to take another look at this, perhaps after August the 19th, and we can reflect back and think, this is what was going on around August the 19th, and now we can look at this election coming up with perhaps a perspective in mind.
So what we've actually done, I can't speak for Penny, but I'm getting really tired. We've put a lot of energy into this, as you can tell. But I do think we should try and summarise it in just 1 or 2 minutes, if we possibly can.
We should, and I agree with you. It's quite a lot when you get, when you're doing astrology, you are using your mind. Your brain is like on fire.
Pattern recognition times 10.
Yeah, and then you've got to communicate it in a way that you hope everyone else is going to enjoy it and understand it. So yes, I think it's time to wind it up. So
for me, it's like there's 3 separate points here. There's the immediate Jupiter-Uranus conjunction with the connection to both the British royal family and the Israel-Gaza conflict, and particularly the state of Russia, Putin, and the Ukraine. And that's immediate. There is the full moon in August, which is much more significant for the American election and the fortunes of the 2 prime candidates. And then there's the actual election itself. And it does seem that after April, when I suspect that by perhaps June, we're going to see a lot more clarity around the Middle East conflict, the Russia conflict. Then I suspect the attention will gravitate more and more towards the America thing. And it'll be interesting then to look back on the eclipse of yesterday.
Absolutely, but that will play into it as well. We've got another couple of eclipses coming up, but we're not going to cover that now. I think another thing that's interesting, if we go right back to the beginning, and we had a look at the Jupiter-Uranus conjunctions and its connection with space, man walking on the moon. We have got this year, for the first time since 1969, we've got new, return visits to the moon. Yeah. So there's a lot of exciting stuff in this as well, folks. And I think whether it's the entertainment business, we're looking at film and television. There's some marvelous television programs that are going to excite us. We've got the Olympics. We haven't even talked about the Olympics. What records are going to be broken at this Olympics? Well, we'll have to get there and see. And not without controversy, this Olympics. We didn't include it in our talk, but then
the world is changing at an exponential and accelerated rate. And you either dance with it and you bend and flow with it, or you become rigid, in which case things can get difficult.
Yeah, for all of us. And I often think sometimes when we talk about these, the astrology and what it's doing in the terms of the world and humanity, we sort of sometimes think, well, what can I do about this? Well, hello, what can I do? Lots. We have our own little world, don't we? The world of our lives and our family and our friends. And if we know all these fireworks are going on and that there is great deep change, things coming out that have been buried for years, and it's very uncomfortable. Whether it's the economy, whether it's how we live, whether it's our career, whether it's whatever it is, if we can manage to deal with our circumstances as they happen, try to get an evolved view about it, try not to make things worse by pointing the finger of blame or throwing our hands up and saying there's no solution to this. There is always a solution, folks. That take it from, experience, that you think you don't know what to do, but then when it happens, guess what? You think of a solution. So there's lots of material here for all of us that's exciting and will definitely aid our growth and our awareness and the enjoyment of our lives, how lucky we are to be alive at this time. But at the same time, there are shocks, surprises, things that we can't fix. We can't put them back together because they're broken.
So dance with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And from a final point of view, from my perspective, I've always wanted astrology to be taught in schools, right? And now it's being taught everywhere on the internet. If you are watching this and you've got at least a passing interest in astrology, so go out there and learn a bit more and educate your kids. Because if astrology were out there bigger than it already is, within a couple of generations, we'd see an end to warfare, misogyny, racism. Astrology is one of the last best hopes for humanity. It's about consciousness expansion and accelerating our personal and collective growth. So get into it. What have you got to lose? What have you got to lose?
Absolutely. So, I've so enjoyed this.
We rock. Okay, this has been brilliant. We went into this without any practice, no planning. We just did it spontaneously, no rehearsals. Thank you.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you, Steve, too. Yes, it's great. Because it's a bit of a lonely kind of role being an astrologer. You're so often alone or with a client maybe, but to actually join forces, to be able to share the love, the passion that we have for astrology and to give it out to you, it's a joy, it's a privilege, it's just everything.
And I do think also, without naming names, we all both need to say thank you to our backup crews.
We do, yes, we have great backup here.
We do. We're not going to go any further than that.
No, okay.
But you know who you are. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so I guess it's
goodbye.
Goodbye from me.
Catch you later, world. Bye now.
Bye.